I'm Adam Todd, and welcome to Classroom Dynamics, a teacher podcast. I've always believed that the best way to engage students in a 21st century classroom is to immerse them with the transformative tools that will empower each and every one of them to excel in the world that awaits. My goal is to ignite the spark that propels you and your students in an advanced tomorrow, and your journey into that future starts right now. Classroom Dynamics is supported by Logitech. As education continues to evolve, so does Logitech Education, your partner in content creation for the classroom. With Logitech's cutting-edge technology, students not only learn but also become content creators. Whether it's in person or online, Logitech's tools are designed to inspire educators and learners alike. Capture every educational moment in stunning detail and edit, produce, and share your creative journey with ease. Logitech Education, inspiring the next generation of creators. For more, visit logitech.com/education, transforming classrooms one innovation at a time. Introducing the Logitech Zone Learn headset, a sleek and sophisticated tool crafted to enhance your learning experience. Designed for adaptability, this cutting-edge headset effortlessly transforms any environment into a focused learning zone, be it at home, in a bustling classroom, or on the move. With crystal clear audio and advanced noise-canceling technology, the Zone Learn headset tailors a personalized learning space for your undisturbed concentration. Immerse yourself in coursework, language learning, or virtual presentations with confidence. The precision microphone ensures your voice is heard clearly in virtual classes and meetings, adding impact to your presentations and discussions. Logitech Zone Learn, where sleek design meets advanced technology, revolutionizing the way you learn. Elevate your study sessions, enhance virtual experiences, and embrace the future of education with Logitech. Always connected, always focused, always learning. The Zone Learn headset, your key to success.
For over 20 years, Higher Ground has designed functional technology protection, helping students to work or learn anytime, anywhere. I'm Mark, president of Higher Ground, and I want to share with you how you can get a free sample of any of our rugged shells, sleeves, or clear backpacks. Visit hggear.com/sample and use your school's email and address. One thing, don't tell Alex because he'll be stuck with all the paperwork. Request yours and see for yourself how Higher Ground can help save your students and school downtime and money. Just remember, don't tell Alex.
Mark, what are all these sample requests filling my inbox?
Welcome to Classroom Dynamics, the podcast where we get into the exciting world of technology and education. Hi everybody, I'm your host Adam Todd, and today we're exploring the fascinating and relatively new world of BrainPOP Science, featuring my special guest, Dr. Michelle Newstadt, a dynamic educator and science enthusiast who serves as the Senior Director of STEM Learning Design for BrainPOP Science. With a wealth of experience in middle school education, Dr. Newstadt brings energy and innovation to STEM learning and is dedicated to making science education engaging, interactive, rigorous, and accessible to students and teachers worldwide. Her passion for inspiring middle school students is palpable when she speaks about phenomenon-based science and evidence-based writing as a means to develop students' science knowledge and practices. So prepare to be inspired as Dr. Michelle Newstadt joins us to explore how multidimensional science education can benefit you and your students. But before we chat with Dr. Newstadt, let's unpack what BrainPOP Science is all about. What distinguishes BrainPOP Science from BrainPOP, the product you may already be familiar with, is its focus on middle school science. Transcending traditional and sometimes stagnant textbook learning, BrainPOP Science elevates middle school science learning to new heights with ready-to-use student-driven investigations, engineering projects, and interactive activities such as simulations, 3D worlds, and data manipulatives. BrainPOP Science embraces the power of active learning, challenging students to gather information and explain phenomena, especially with a focus on the expression of ideas through writing. And investigations are meticulously structured to activate prior knowledge, encourage observation, and verify understanding through checkpoint activities. Additionally, students are prompted to reflect through self-assessment opportunities and describe what they noticed during an investigation. Interactive data graphs add an extra layer of engagement for students, which can lead to a much better and deeper understanding of what's being studied. But don't worry, BrainPOP fans, BrainPOP Science also has engaging movies integrated strategically within the investigations, therefore enriching the overall learning experience. Students watch these familiar style movies that are woven in, recording observations that tie back to the guiding question. And when it comes to the teacher, you can take control of your online class environment by creating a class, generating assignments, and accessing helpful class data, including student skill performance. This not only helps the teacher keep tabs on what's going on throughout, but also helps teachers make better informative instructional decisions. In essence, BrainPOP Science helps make science comprehensible and enjoyable while providing an advanced and interactive learning environment, transforming the way students experience science-related topics. Now, coming up next, we'll chat with Dr. Michelle Newstadt as she shares insights and tips into the captivating world of BrainPOP Science. Get ready for an educational journey that's sure to inspire how you view the process in which we teach science and how we can unlock scientific curiosity in every student. We'll be right back. Are you a dedicated educator searching for fresh and engaging resources to inspire your students? Look no further than Highly Motivated on Teachers Pay Teachers. Discover a treasure trove of easy-to-use lesson plans, vibrant visuals, and interactive activities designed to captivate young minds and ignite their love for learning. Unlock the potential within your classroom with Highly Motivated, from differentiated lap books to test prep passages on a multitude of topics. Our wide range of materials cater to most elementary and middle school grade levels. Join the community of passionate teachers who have already transformed their classrooms. Visit Highly Motivated on Teachers Pay Teachers and get ready to inspire, motivate, and empower your students like never before. Highly Motivated on Teachers Pay Teachers, where knowledge meets inspiration. She's the Senior Director of STEM Learning Design for BrainPOP Science, and her passion for making science education engaging, interactive, rigorous, and accessible has helped to shape BrainPOP's approach to science education. Dr. Michelle Newstadt brings expertise in educational research, pedagogy, and the integration of technology to ensure that BrainPOP STEM content not only meets academic standards, but also fosters a love for learning. Through her leadership, Michelle continues to contribute significantly to the evolution of STEM education, empowering students to explore and understand the wonders of science and technology. I'd like to welcome Dr. Michelle Newstadt to Classroom Dynamics. It's so great to have you here today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
So before we even start and get into what BrainPOP Science is, and it really is amazing, just tell everyone a little bit about your background in science and also in STEM education, and of course, your role with BrainPOP today.
Sure, absolutely. So sort of going way back, I was a geology major. I love to get out into the field and really see science all around me. And my college science experience really inspired me to get more involved in, to continue with the field. So I actually taught middle and high school science in New York City. And then my learners kept asking me these questions and sometimes demonstrated different struggles, or they had alternative conceptions about something in science. And I found myself, I was asking more and more questions. So of course, that brought me back to grad school. And at grad school, I studied science education, specifically a focus on curriculum and instruction. And I was incredibly fortunate to be on some National Science Foundation grants to see how we use technology to really enhance learning for all of our learners. And then I looked at post-grad school. I did a postdoc, and I looked at science literacy and students writing in science specifically, and how peers can give feedback. And that was really, really great, again, in the tech space. So I started work in a startup and doing all sorts of curriculum design and looking how learners sort of take bite-sized pieces and learn. And then I moved into the nonprofit world, and I was part of the innovation team and the research team. And then fortunately, about 3 years ago, I started at BrainPOP Science. And at BrainPOP, I am the Senior Director of Learning Design, and my focus is STEM. And what that means is I have an amazing team who not only generates the content, the engaging, quirky BrainPOP content, but we also help create the learning experience. We want to make sure it's accessible for all of our learners, and we also create the teacher experience. So how do we support teachers in the act of inquiry-based science?
You actually said a really important word there, experience, right? Because experience for you and myself when we were little is not the same experience as the kids have today, just because of the amount of technology that they have at their fingertips, right? So that's actually a really important part of BrainPOP Science, isn't it?
Absolutely. So what we do is we want to make sure when a learner comes into BrainPOP Science that we level the playing field. They start with a phenomenon, and this is intentional to activate prior knowledge, bring in past experiences. But if a learner, for example, has never made a s'more before and we're asking about chemical reactions or physical changes, we start with someone roasting a marshmallow and making the s'more. So everyone engages at the same time. And then we purposely scaffold the experience throughout to ensure that if a learner has a bit of a struggle, that's okay. There's purposeful struggle built in for every learner, and the experience is a cohesive experience. So it brings each learner to a really high cognitive demand task at the end, which is our claim, evidence, and reasoning.
So BrainPOP Science is relatively new. It's a new offering that's designed for middle school. Tell us about BrainPOP Science, and can you walk us through its unique approach with that?
Absolutely. So BrainPOP Science is new. Many of you probably know BrainPOP. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary, but BrainPOP Science just launched about 2.5 years ago, and it is absolutely designed for the middle school audience. In our design, we really want to focus on learners practicing the practices. So what does that mean? That means that every investigation, which is a lesson, is built around the idea of learners should be using models and they can analyze data and they really use mathematical thinking in their everyday approach. So we have designed these lessons, these investigations, to start with a real world phenomenon. How can we get learners interested? How can we get them engaged and see science all around them? And then our learners are the doers. So they need to engage with all of our interactive resources. So we have simulations, data manipulatives that have real world data sets from like NOAA and NASA. We have related readings and primary source materials. And throughout all of this, learners answer questions. They also make observations. So these observations then carry through the whole investigation. And at the end, they have to answer this guiding question. The guiding question is given to them at the beginning of the investigation so they can continually think about it. So for example, why can't you unbake a cake? Is one of the guiding questions. So it's a scientific question, but it's engaging. It's interesting. It's something that many of us have experienced before. When you put something into the oven for like cupcakes or cake or cookies, whatever, it can unbake. So students then answer that at the end in a claim, evidence, and reasoning format.
I love that. So you have investigation, observation, experience, and claim-based, it just really takes the whole circle of STEM and science really, and it kind of does really combine it into almost a new topic. Like a new topic of study, right? It really is almost, because if you think about it, right, we always had science and that was good. And then the technology came into play. You could even put the A for STEAM in there if you really wanted to and add another layer to that onion. But it really almost has evolved in the last couple of years as almost a whole new topic, comparatively to just either looking at it as science or STEM.
I love that framing because I've never heard that before. But if I think back to my early years in, elementary school, middle school, a lot of the science expectation was memorization. It was so unbelievably different. So now we're in this really unique and I think incredible time. It's an awesome opportunity for teachers and learners to really dig in, have evidence-based statements and arguments, and really critically think. My goal as a teacher wasn't necessarily for every learner that I had to become a scientist, but I wanted every learner that I had to see that they can think and be a scientist. They can think critically, they can analyze, they can write and have an evidence-based statement at the end. And I think that's the evolution of the science classroom these days. It really has morphed into, like you said, STEAM or STEM, but it has this multidimensional component that it all has to come together. The parts, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts kind of feeling in our modern day science classroom.
And that's not always easy for a teacher to do.
No, it's a huge challenge. It's absolutely, it takes more time. The approaches students have to dig in. They need multi-modalities to interact with, to really start making connections. And again, like the students are expected to be critical thinkers and bring creativity, and the same challenges for the teachers. This is new. I like to think about my first year as a teacher, and I thought I was just rocking it. And then I look back and I kind of cringe. I'm like, oh, those poor students. I thought I was doing great, but was it okay? And it's similar with these new standards coming out, with these new expectations. Teachers have to give themselves some grace, and the educational community has to support them. So, for example, in BrainPOP Science, we know this is hard work. Everyone on our team has been in the classroom and taught this way. So all of our resources are embedded that teachers, we help support, say, hey, this is where a student might struggle. This is how you can help them through it. Here's another resource you can provide. Or, hey, this claim evidence and reasoning thing, we know students often really struggle with the reasoning part. Let's give examples that you might see coming out of your classroom in ways that you can support the learner to get to the next level. So it shouldn't all fall on the teacher. It has to be a whole community. It's really the responsibility of everyone generating content, any technology or anything like that. We need to offer different supports for every teacher who's at a different point in this inquiry-based approach.
So I've asked this question a couple of times during the STEM series that we have going on for this month. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But what is your own personal definition of STEM, and how does it play a role with BrainPOP Science?
Yeah, I love that question. So for me, it's that multidimensional component. It's the interdisciplinary, everything coming together. So if you think about a scientist, and I'm not talking about someone in a lab necessarily. I'm talking about the baker, there's science everywhere. There's math in that, right? I don't know a single scientist or someone who does the act of science without thinking and having computational skills. Engineering components. I love the idea of engineering embedded with the sciences. So often in the past, when engineering was taught, it was when I was a learner, and I did this as a teacher too. I didn't realize I built like the classic toothpick bridge, right? But it didn't have the science with it. So STEM and STEAM to me are the idea that none of this should be taught in isolation. It all builds on itself. As an educational community, we need to build resources that embed that together.
Right, because it's the fabric that holds that whole thing together anyway.
Absolutely. Like once you start pulling them apart, we take the context out of it for the learner. So for example, in our engineering projects, we make it a very specific point to pick the content standard that we're aligning to first, before we develop a problem statement. Because if we can't tie it to the science content, then they're engineering or gadgeteering, but they're not necessarily designing a solution to the problem. And similarly, on the flip side, if we just make it that there's a single solution to an engineering problem, then they're not bringing in the STEAM, the creative components. They're not bringing in the math. They're not bringing in the technology and different design pieces to figure it out, to prototype, to iterate, and then see if failure is okay. So when you bring it out all together, all of a sudden you have this thinker who's thinking in these different dimensions. And I think it's incredible.
I like how you said that too, because failure is okay. And I don't think a lot of teachers, even students to some degree, I think when I was a kid, I was afraid to fail more than anything. And I think if somebody would have said to me, it's okay to fail, that's the best way you're going to learn, I maybe I would have taken that, or I wouldn't have. I don't know if I would have run with that at age 8 or 9. But I think for teachers, I think they're almost afraid to fail at the lesson or have the end result fail, when that's not really the whole purpose of it anyway. You almost want somebody to fail in this situation, because you want them to have that, okay, how am I going to figure this out? How do I get over the problem? What else is connected to it that could help me figure it out?
Absolutely.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, in our engineering projects, we have purposely built in the idea that, hey, your first attempt at a prototype, it likely is not the best one. Even if you solve the problem that we gave you, we're going to put in another component. We call it sort of the rat constraint internally, which is the idea of we're going to make it more challenging. So if you didn't fail the first time, we're going to push you to fail and figure out how to improve on the second time. Similarly, for teachers, like having an engineering project, having something that is very new to you as a teacher, I mean, that's terrifying. And you're up in front of 30 plus kids and middle schoolers. I mean, I love the middle school age group, but middle schoolers can be,
Oh, they'll look through you with daggers, right?
Absolutely. So I feel for the teacher as well in terms of, if a lesson fails, can we be upfront about it to our learners and say, oh, that didn't go well, but what did go well? What part of the process and how can we improve together? And that's also a part of like the STEAM component. But yeah, the failure piece, I know for my students, that was the absolute toughest thing. I know for my own kids, building in the idea that perfection is not part of it. And perfection is definitely not part of science. So yeah, I think it's really interesting to think about it that way.
Okay, so with that answer, how do teachers then use BrainPOP Science to make it just engaging? Because I think the engagement part is probably the biggest piece, especially for middle schoolers, and of course accessible for everyone. How does BrainPOP work that out?
So that's a huge focus for us. As you said, the engagement piece is incredibly important. So what we start with is actually during our brainstorming sessions, we say to ourselves, okay, here's a standard or here's a topic we want to hit. And we start thinking of all the different sort of quirky, odd things that might hit that topic. And we really try to approach it in a different way than a teacher may have and help do some of that heavy lifting for them. So that's where we start in our brainstorming sessions. And then we go into the idea of what phenomenon can we show? So sometimes we're very purposeful and do something that really all of our learners can really say, oh, I've seen that before on the street or something like that. And other times we really are purposeful of exposing learners to new situations that they may never have seen, heard of, or anything like that. And then in our phenomenon, we're extremely purposeful in the video or the image that we show and the scaffolded questions to make sure everyone's understanding and engaging to start. And then BrainPOP is really known and BrainPOP Science for engaging learners where they are and making it sort of fun. I've used the word quirky a few times, but like our related readings and our movies are purposely giving analogies and ideas that really kids can relate to, even if the concept is complex. We're approaching a learner and the child at the level where they are and acknowledging that they are fully capable of understanding this tough concept. So we do that. We also, our simulations are purposely built in a way that we help learners focus on the key ideas and the key practices. We do that through questioning because I know in my classroom, sometimes middle schoolers have a tendency to be a little click happy when we get into things. So we make it in a way that they have freedom and autonomy to look around, but we also create some guardrails so they don't get too far off track, so they can stay in that concept. We also make sure that our resources that are embedded in our investigation are about 10 to 15 minutes long max. So if the investigation is being broken up over several class periods, a learner can have a natural stopping point. So we do all that. And we've heard from the field that teachers are able to, different kids like different things, but it tends to be that phenomenon that brings everyone together and it starts that discussion in class. And
there's your prior knowledge too, right? You're bringing that in, and that's usually what will gain a lot of engagement. So if a kid is sitting there going, okay, no, I understand. I experienced that. I've seen that before. I've heard that before. It does at least lend to the springboard into the investigation.
Absolutely. And we also want the teachers to be able to have an opportunity to surface those ideas. Because, when we're in the classroom and a learner brings something up, it's often not completely wrong, but sometimes they start out with a slight alternative conception coming in, which is totally fine. We just need to know about it so we can continue to bring in additional ideas. So the learner can do that. Or they might come in with a ton of background knowledge and we might need to push them and differentiate. And that's what we do in BrainPOP Science. Right. We offer differentiation for that learner that needs that extension, but also for that learner that might need a little bit more of that, foundational knowledge, it's there and can be assigned to the learner.
So then let's go into an investigation. What does a BrainPOP Science investigation look like? And let's take like a 7th grade middle school level. Like, what does that look like? How do you, how does a teacher go about starting? What's the process? What's the overall lesson? What does it look like for them?
Yeah. So I like to start at the end. So I'm going to start at the end of an investigation, sort of to give a little bit of where we're going on the journey. So every investigation ends with a scientific explanation or an argument. And this is an opportunity for students to write their open text boxes, and the end result is an evidence-based writing statement. So the claim is a 1-sentence claim answering the guiding question that carries throughout the investigation. Students gather observations that turn into evidence. So the evidence statements, that we encourage them to have at least two pieces of evidence from different resources. And then the reasoning, which I mentioned earlier, is the toughest piece. The reasoning encompasses, scientific principles, and they really connect their claim and their evidence. So that's sort of the end result. That's the package that learners end with. For teachers, we like to think about it. It's 45 minutes plus a CER, claim, evidence, and reasoning. And we provide classroom slide decks that the teacher can start. So we've noticed 2 approaches from our teachers. They start with a classroom slide deck. So everyone's in the same spot. Everyone does the activate section with the phenomenon together. And then they move to the observe and check with all these interactive resources. They may have learners turn and talk to each other and share observations that they made from a simulation or a data manipulative. So for example, if we are doing what I talked about earlier, can you unbake a cake? The end result is that no, and then they're going to show all the evidence. And they then in their reasoning talk about the chemical reactions and what happens there. So in the initial phenomenon that they might watch as a group, there's actually a video of a cake rising in an oven, and you could see the browning. And we often see teachers say, hey, what are some signs of chemical reactions? And turn and talk, or we have a whole group. And then in that example, they go into the observe and check. There's a simulation where they gather observations. There's a reading where we talk about food and chemical reactions and physical changes. We also have embedded assessments, so a teacher can get a quick snapshot of what they know. And this is all happening often in a class period, and then they may do the CER the next day, or they bring it home for homework, or sometimes teachers assign this and students work on their own or in groups, and the teacher might be working in small groups doing something else like a station activity.
So you said something important, assessments. I think a lot of teachers and even kids, if they are listening, but teachers for the most part do cringe too when they hear assessments, mostly because some teachers will, fear a state kind of test assessment, and some just fear the small little tidbit kind of assessment where they're a little nervous that they're not picking up on it and they have to go back and what is that going to do to their lesson planning moving forward? So what's your perspective on nurturing scientific curiosity and critical thinking while at the same time getting students ready for assessments, whether it is that, embedded assessment in the investigation or it is an end result, end of the year state assessment, because that is problematic, in terms of a teacher. How do you balance all that, and how do you get past it, and how much weight do you really put on it? So what's the approach that BrainPOP Science takes with that to help them?
Yeah, assessments are a reality of our field, and the summative assessment it's scary for teachers and learners. So the way we approach it from BrainPOP Science, we want to think about it as we're giving learners an opportunity to get ready in a very low stakes environment. So if we start looking, the assessment world is changing in science. So this multidimensional approach where learners have to put it all together. So the concepts, the practices, the cross-cutting ideas, all that needs to come together. And these test questions are asking that. So what we do in BrainPOP Science is we have our stimulus, our data manipulative, our simulation, our movie, and we actually ask questions that are very, very similar to what a learner might see on a summative assessment. But it's super low stakes, and it's also scaffolded. So a learner is actually practicing and getting ready for that assessment or getting ready for high school. We're really building that foundation in how we structure our investigations, how we structure our individual resources. It's the same thing. And then we also have opportunities. We have what we call quizzes, which are outside the investigations that are very purposely using the item types that a learner will see on a summative assessment. And we're asking, like we've all seen it, some of the questions tend to be very lengthy. So really it's how does a learner read through the question and decipher what's being asked? And we ask those types of questions as well. So we are very aware of the fact that students need to be ready at the end of the year, specifically end of 8th grade for many areas for this summative assessment. So we do it in an engaging way. And I personally think if a learner is a critical thinker, if they can write using scientific ideas, if they can interact and manipulate models and really engage, they'll be totally fine on a summative assessment because they're learning those practices and those ideas throughout. And teachers can also use BrainPOP Science to help reteach and go back and say, hey, I know you saw this in 6th grade. Let's do a simulation or let's do a quiz that you may not have seen the content in a while, but you know the practices and the cross-cutting concepts already.
It's kind of a great segue into my next question with just even the claim evidence reasoning process of BrainPOP Science. And just the whole writing component, that is a huge component of BrainPOP Science. Why is the art of writing in science so important, even if it's just a standalone, but also with regards to STEM as a field of study and the ability to be that effective critical thinker and communicator? What puts that weight in that and makes that writing process so critical?
If you asked me that maybe 20 years ago, I would have laughed and said, I picked science as a major because I didn't want to read or write. And boy, was I wrong. The most important skill that I have from the research side, from the science side, is the ability to write. I can communicate my ideas. And also we know from research, learners that are learning literacy skills, like the writing, like reading scientific concepts embedded within context, that's actually building their literacy skills as well. Learning that in context is so important. It helps build that prior knowledge. It helps build the critical reading skills. And that's one of the reasons we stress it.
It's your buy one, get one free.
Exactly.
Like situation, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And then the other piece is we're going back to the assessment piece. So if you look at a lot of our new assessments, right, a lot of the questions maybe give a claim and say, pick the evidence that supports it. Or they might say, what is the reasoning behind this? Or explain. So by having the learners do it in a very purposeful way and in an open text response, they are really doing the heavy lifting. They are the doers there, and they're building that. So if we've seen that if learners really have an opportunity, at least for CERs, claim evidence and reasoning, that they're starting to really develop their reasoning skills. And we see a lot of growth in that. So it's building that skill set. And in high school, if you talk to any high school teacher, they want their kids coming in with the ability to write and reason. I mean, across the board. I'm not just saying science teachers. So right, really helps prepare.
And it's one thing to think it and be able to understand it, but then to process that out in writing can sometimes be a hurdle that some kids can't get past.
Absolutely. Writing is so hard. Being clear and concise and being able to articulate what you're thinking in words, it's just so challenging. It's just such a great opportunity to practice it.
Right. So let's marry everything together now, right? So with the growing emphasis on even project-based learning, using your hands, all that hands-on approach, good stuff, the engineering, the computer science, how does BrainPOP Science support teachers in implementing engineering projects in the classroom that are going to be hands-on? And what benefits does that provide?
Yeah, engineering is popping up everywhere. We see it in the next generation science standards. We see it in so many state standards. And the question comes up, how do you do this? How do you do it in a timely manner? Because if we think about some of the open-ended projects we do in class, they could just take a life of their own and really take weeks upon weeks. And one thing we also wanted to look at is how do we give learners a problem that they can solve without putting the weight of the world on them. So we don't want them to clean up all the plastics in the ocean in their 7th grade science class. It would be amazing if they came up with that, but that's not the expectation. So the way we've approached our engineering projects is I think I mentioned earlier, we pick the science concept that we really want to be at the forefront. And then we start with our problem statements. We don't start with solutions yet because we want to see, is this a true problem that a learner might encounter? So we do things like you want to recycle gray water from your cafeteria and use it in your school garden. How can you build this? So, but you have a limited space for this. So when we do this, we come up with problem statements that are engaging and relevant for the learners. And then we start to think about, are there multiple solutions to this? If there's a single solution, it's not going to be an engineering project for us. We want learners to approach it. And as I said earlier, the solution itself is not that important, but we don't want a learner to think there's a single right answer, because that's really not how engineering works in the real world.
Right. So it's a good point too, because you want them to understand there's more than one way to skin a cat, that if you can't figure it out this way, there's always another way you can approach it.
Yeah, I love thinking about that. So we see that learners work in a group here. So our engineering projects are both online. So they do their brainstorming and their research online. And then they they'll actually design and prototype a solution and they'll test it. So for example, one of our problem statements is you dropped your keys when you came off the bus, you dropped them down the sewer. How can you get them out? So they have laundry baskets and they are creating simple machines to try to get them out. Often they fail to pick them up, and that's okay. We say, okay, where did it fail? How can you improve your design? And what we see during this whole process, to your point about project-based learning, each learner takes on a different role in the project. And some of our kids are great with the brainstorm. They have these creative ideas. It's awesome. Other kids are coming in with the science knowledge and really can put that in and say, hey, remember when we learned about simple machines? This is how it went. Another kid might be great at building, and they haven't been able to show and shine in their classroom at other points. And all of a sudden they're building this incredible hook and fishing rod type setup to get your keys out of the sewer. So it's really a great opportunity for students to learn from their peers, also to grow with their peers. And these take usually about 2 to 3 class periods to do. We are very purposeful in making sure that the engineering projects take time to think about, but it's not this huge idea. So a learner can really stay focused on the problem and solution.
I love that example of the sewer. That's great. What a great idea for people to take if they're listening to that. And you could probably almost see it tomorrow. Everyone's going to try something along those lines.
Oh,
That's
please
a great
send
idea.
pictures. Yeah, I want to see the solutions.
I love it. Even with the simple machines, it's so it's intriguing. Like, wow, okay, that could happen to me. I could come off a bus. I could drop something down the sewer. How do I get it? It's a real world problem.
Absolutely.
I love that. So many people do look at STEM as a male-dominated subject. I think that's been the case for a long time now. But as a leader in STEM education, what advice would you give to educators looking to inspire students as a whole, but more specifically foster a passion for STEM with girls?
Yeah, when I look right in my college classes, there were very few females. And, I look back and I said to myself, well, how did I get into this? It was my 8th grade science teacher, and she just made science come to life. And it was incredible. And she pushed me. She asked questions. So I know for myself, that was a huge factor. And then my parents were very much like, hey, this seems to be something you like. Why don't you try it? So I was really fortunate to have it both at school and at home. And I fell in love with geology. I didn't even know it existed before I went to college. It was a teacher who inspired me. So for teachers out there, I would say build your kids up, make it engaging, make the aha moments. And I know
that ends up as an equal playing field if you do that.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. And I know in the middle school space, it's a really important time for kids to continue to engage in science. Often, if you talk to kids coming out of elementary school, I love experiments. I love this. I love that. And then for whatever reason in middle school, it gets serious. I don't know any other way to say it, but we can be engaging and serious and rigorous all at the same time and still inspire kids to continue on. I think also having girls see themselves in the fields, also showing kids that, like I mentioned earlier, I think lab scientists are great, but that's not the only way to be a scientist. It's everywhere. So, show different careers in STEM, in agriculture, in sports science, physiology, and baking and all that. Because personally, I didn't know any of that existed when I was growing up. And I was fortunate enough to be exposed to different things, and I fell in love with it. And I think many learners would benefit from that.
And teachers now have the ability at their fingertips with being able to access internet websites and videos to really bring that to life and show, hey, look, this can happen. You can do this. Look how cool this is. I think when, if you go back 10 or 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. You might have had a story, or you might have had something written in a textbook, and you didn't get the full, just brunt of what you could possibly do down the line, because it just wasn't there, as a three-dimensional something that you could hold in your hand, or something that you could wrap your mind around. It was just a story in a book, or it was a story that someone was telling. Now to show video and show what people can do in the real world to bring STEM in, I think does make a difference. And I think that will help level the playing field a little bit.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Well, listen, this has been so informative, such an engaging conversation. You had such amazing examples and suggestions. I'm really glad we had the chance to learn more about you and what BrainPOP Science can bring to a science or even a STEM lesson and in a classroom. Before we go, just tell everyone where they can go to find out more about BrainPOP Science.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. I could talk about this forever. So for BrainPOP Science, you could go to science.brainpop.com and take a look. We have an investigation up there that you could check out for free, and play around. If you do the keys in the sewer, let me know. I'd love to see a picture.
Definitely. We'll put it up on our Twitter and our Instagram if they do. And if anyone's out there listening and you try this one, we definitely want to see that. We want to put that up. Well, for those of you who have been listening, thank you for tuning in today, and make sure that you share what you've learned or any takeaways or reflections that you've had. And of course, tag us on Twitter at Class Dynamics or Instagram at Classroom Dynamics Podcast. We always look forward to hearing your thoughts on our episodes and sharing the different ways in which you're using what you've learned. You can also help support Classroom Dynamics with as little as $3 a month at classroomdynamicspodcast.buzzsprout.com. Once again, I'd like to thank Michelle Newstadt from BrainPOP for joining us today on Classroom Dynamics. It's been such a pleasure having you on with us. And I also want to give a special thank you to Alana Koritsky, the Vice President of Communications and Social Impact at BrainPOP. Alana has been a big part of the BrainPOP episodes that we've had on this past year, and I just wanted to make sure that I gave both of you a proper thank you. So thank you to you guys, and of course the whole BrainPOP team. We couldn't have done it without you.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Classroom Dynamics, where knowledge and inspiration meets innovation. I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion and found it both insightful and uplifting. As always, my goal is to provide you with practical strategies, engaging stories, and powerful insights that can fuel your motivation as an educator. I believe that when knowledge and inspiration do come together, incredible things can happen in your classroom. And for all of you who may feel that it's too late to strengthen your craft, I challenge you to make it your mission to do so. You've worked hard to get to where you are today, and it's never too late to infuse new life into your work. So why not make today that day to do so? I'm Adam Todd, and you've been listening to Classroom Dynamics, a teacher podcast. You can follow Classroom Dynamics on X at Class Dynamics or on Instagram at Classroom Dynamics Podcast. If you haven't already, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you know a teacher who may benefit from today's show, please share it with them. We'll be back soon with more captivating conversations, inspiring stories, and strategies that you can implement into your everyday routines. Until then, keep igniting that spark in your classroom and never stop believing in the incredible impact you have as an educator. You're more powerful and inspirational than you think. If you like this episode, you'll enjoy my episode with Dr. Barbara Hubert, the Senior Director of Learning Design at BrainPOP. In this engaging conversation, we discover how BrainPOP designs its content to cater to a diversity of learners, ensuring that education is accessible and engaging for all. Dr. Hubert takes us on a journey through the thought process behind the creation of BrainPOP's beloved characters, including Tim and Moby, and explores the fascinating history behind these educational personas.
I often hear subject matter teachers say, gosh, I need to help my kids with their literacy skills, but I'm a social studies teacher, or a science teacher, or a technology teacher. Like, help. How do I do that? I can't do both, right? Yeah. Like, I don't have time to teach those literacy skills. And then there's another camp that says, but we're all literacy teachers. And like BrainPOP really holds that ethos and says, like, But we are, and we're going to embed those literacy skills, which are just their meaning making, comprehension, vocab acquisition skills, into different subjects and sort of help do a little bit of the lift for you.